welcome to this week's edition of World Today, where we will be focusing on Afghanistan, the G20 meeting on Afghanistan, as also aggression by China in the Taiwan Straits and response of Taipei to Beijing. While the world is waiting to witness an inclusive order in Afghanistan, there are many who are engaging the new Taliban administration, including Washington, D.C. The latest being a round of talks in Doha between senior U.S. administration officials and a Taliban delegation led by their foreign minister. This was followed by an extraordinary meeting of G20 leaders to discuss the situation in Afghanistan. The focus right now is not just inclusivity, but the huge humanitarian crisis that the country is facing today.
Afghanistan is reeling under a severe humanitarian crisis. Food shortage, power outage, no salaries, and the onset of winters. If things do not change, there will be a human cost for the impasse on aid for the country. World leaders met virtually to discuss this crisis. The G20 leadership vowed to accelerate aid to Afghanistan amidst concerns that an already precarious humanitarian and financial situation will grow catastrophic.
Now we have to answer the humanitarian crisis. That's the very first thing. If that requires, and it will require contacts with the Taliban. There's no alternative to having contacts with them. They are essential for this answer, for this response to be effective. But as you said, that doesn't imply a recognition. A recognition will have to acknowledge that the Taliban will be judged for what their deeds are, not their words.
Not recognizing, but certainly engaging to ensure that the Afghans do not suffer. The G20 leaders also demanded that the Taliban government allow humanitarian access across Afghanistan, keep Kabul airport and the country's borders open, and ensure security for UN, humanitarian and diplomatic staff.
The window is actually closing by every day in terms of the time we have to reach more and more. Let's not forget, winter in Afghanistan is harsh. Winter in Afghanistan can kill if people don't have the resources and if you end up being under the open skies. So it's really merciless.
The biggest fear right now is of how funds would be used by the Taliban administration. The reason why US has still not unfrozen the funds of the Central Bank of Afghanistan. The first meeting took place between senior Taliban officials and US administration representatives was in Doha. Washington, D.C. made it very clear that the aid will be handed over directly to the people through agencies and not through the administration in Kabul.
Well, we recently announced nearly $64 million in additional humanitarian assistance in advance of today, I should say, for the people of Afghanistan. The United States is the single largest humanitarian donor in Afghanistan, providing nearly $330 million this year alone, and we will continue to take steps to alleviate the suffering of the Afghan people and call on other donors to step up their contributions to help deliver critical assistance. So the recent $64 million brought us up to $333 and makes us far and away the largest donor.
Meanwhile, the European Union has pledged more support to avoid the collapse of Afghan economy. But it in no way means according recognition to the Taliban. Development cooperation will only resume once the Taliban fulfills the 5 benchmarks set by the EU as a condition for it.
Yes, we have already increased our humanitarian assistance, but it's not enough. It's not enough to avert famine and a major humanitarian crisis. It's crucial to complement it with the delivery of what we can say humanitarian plus aid in direct support of the population. It doesn't mean that the 5 benchmarks that we agreed by the Council are not relevant anymore. By the contrary, they remain valid and they must be fully met before regular development cooperation can resume.
The benchmarks include preventing Afghanistan from being used as a base for international terrorism, respecting human rights, in particular women's rights, the rule of law and freedom of the media. Number 3, allowing the departure of foreign citizens and at-risk Afghans in line with what was already decided by the United Nations Security Resolution 2593. Number 4, the establishment of an inclusive and representative transitional government through negotiations amongst political forces in Afghanistan. And lastly, free access for humanitarian aid, respecting EU procedures and conditions for its delivery. Before the Taliban takeover in August, the Afghan economy was dependent on international aid that accounted for 75% of state spending. The country is grappling with a liquidity crisis as assets remain frozen in the US and other countries, and disbursements from international organizations have been put on hold.
Iran kicked off its military drills recently, putting the entire Middle East, that is West Asia, on the edge. It is not so much the defense drills, which is a regular and annual feature, that was a worry, but the announcement by Iran that they successfully now have an integrated air defense system, that is the Iranian Iron Dome. That now has not just worried neighbors, Israel, but also the West, including the United States of America. Here's a report.
Iran's army and the Revolutionary Guard kicked off a massive 2-day air defense drill in the country's sprawling central desert called Wilayat. The annual drill has put neighbors and countries in the region on tenterhooks. Why? Because Iran has claimed success in its integrated air defense network. The system confronted various threats and supposedly intercepted them.
If any aggressor dares to come close to our soil and waters, they will face serious confrontation with our dear youths.
This has worried the region. Tehran sending out a strong message to the West that sanctions will not deter them. Iran regularly holds such drills and says they assess the troops' combat readiness and demonstrate the nation's military capabilities. But for Israel, an Iranian Iron Dome could spell disaster.
There's huge terror machine that is not resting for a moment, and neither can we rest for a moment. Wherever they are, we must always be one step ahead of them. When a problem develops, it needs to be flooded and addressed before it becomes a chronic problem. Repression and ignoring problems, this is not an option. Allowing the enemy to intensify and the terrorist organizations to become terrorist states with an army and tens of thousands of missiles. This is not an option.
Earlier in October, Iran held a drill near its border with Azerbaijan, putting on a display of military capabilities near a neighbor it is increasingly skeptical of for its ties to the West and Israel. Azerbaijan and Israel have strengthened their military alliance in recent months, with Israeli-supplied high-tech drones helping Azerbaijan in its conflict with Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh last year.
When the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia was in progress, considerable numbers of the Islamic State terrorists were summoned to this region. We do not really trust that they have left. They must go from this region. We felt the need to demonstrate a show of force in this area.
The region remains on edge over Iran's escalating nuclear program. Talks in Vienna to revive Tehran's now tattered 2015 accord with world powers have stalled since June, with no date set for their resumption. The US is monitoring developments in the Persian region, while the nuke deal continues to hang in balance.
We're united in the proposition that Iran cannot be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. And President Biden is committed to that proposition. We believe that the diplomatic path is the most effective way to ensure that that doesn't happen. But as we've had occasion to discuss in recent weeks, despite the fact that we've made abundantly clear over the last 9 months that we are prepared to return to full compliance with the JCPOA if Iran does the same, what we are seeing, or maybe more accurately not seeing, from Tehran now suggests that they're not.
With Vienna talks stalled, Iran is enriching small amounts of uranium to weapons-grade purity, while it maintains its nuclear program is only for peaceful purposes.
Republic of China, that is Taiwan, celebrated its National Day amid increased tensions with China. An intensifying of clashes after Taipei's pushback against China's claims over the island nation and Xi Jinping's call for reunification. Today, Taiwan is redefining herself as a sovereign nation with her own military and, of course, now a winning Olympics entourage.
Taiwan's show of strength, its military might on display. The Republic of China celebrated its 20th National Day amid heightened tensions in Taiwan Straits, with Beijing sending military sorties to intimidate the island nation. But an unrelenting Taipei sent out a strong message to Beijing.
We will continue to bolster our national defense and demonstrate our determination to defend ourselves in order to ensure that nobody can force Taiwan to take the path China has laid out for us. This is because the path that China has laid out for us offers neither a free and democratic way of life for Taiwan, nor sovereignty for our 23 million people.
China claims Taiwan as part of its national territory, although the island is self-ruled. And now with allies and partners in countries like Japan, Australia and the US. Taiwan's military strength was at full display at the National Day Parade, brandishing a range of weaponry including missile launchers and armored vehicles, while fighter jets and helicopters soared overhead. Tensions escalated with deliberate provocation, patriotically timed by China on October 1st, China's National Day. China flew 38 aircraft, including fighter jets and bombers, towards Taiwan. The PLA flew 56 planes off the southwest coast of Taiwan on a single day earlier this month, setting a new record and capping 4 days of sustained pressure involving 149 flights. All were in international airspace, but raised fears that any misstep could provoke an unintended escalation. But the threats from Beijing continued.
The Democratic Progressive Party authorities and Taiwan Independence Forces have misjudged the situation, colluded with external forces, and continuously sought independence provocations. This is the source of the current tension and turmoil across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan independence will only bring disasters to Taiwan people, and only by resolutely stopping the conspiracy of independence can the safety and well-being of Taiwan compatriots be maintained.
The island's defense minister called it the toughest situation I have seen in more than 40 years of my military life. The threats come even as Chinese President Xi Jinping called for reunification of Taiwan.
The Taiwanese independence and separatism are the biggest obstacles to the motherland's reunification and a grave danger to the national rejuvenation. Those who forget their heritage, betray the motherland, and seek to split the country will come to no good end. And they will be spurned by the people and condemned by history.
While the threats continue, Taiwan is no longer alone in this fight. The international community is keenly watching developments in the Straits. French Senator Alain Richard called recent Chinese pressure and flights by fighter jets towards Taiwan the most serious threat to the region's stability for a long time.
Based on the facts that they are deliberated and continuous, these incursions are the most serious threats to the region's stability that we have witnessed for a long time.
Japan has also grown increasingly vocal about China becoming a security threat. The US also closely monitors developments in the region, overtly and covertly, and is one of the major suppliers of arms and military wear to Taiwan. According to reports, the US Special Forces have been secretly training the Taiwanese military on the island for at least a year in a bid to build up Taiwan's defense capacity, something that has riled China.
This is a typical Cold War mentality. The relevant US departments should view China's development and China-US relations objectively and rationally, and stop doing things that harm the mutual trust and bilateral cooperation and China's sovereignty, security and development interest.
China is an especially difficult challenge for the region and for the world. But Taiwan is taking one step at a time to show it is a sovereign nation, representing herself at the global stage with technology or with wins at the Olympics. Taiwan is a story of resilience amid a continued existential threat.
Welcome back to World Today. Now, the global community is preparing itself for COP26 Climate Change Summit in Glasgow to take place end of the month. While world leaders are debating whether if developed countries are doing enough or not, World Today caught up with the Prime Minister of Denmark, Prime Minister Frederiksen, and she has been at the forefront of this fight against climate change, also has spoken of very vociferously so of how developed countries need to take the onus to ensure developing countries not only develop but also fight climate change.
We have now to move from all the words, from all the speeches, from the targets and the goals to concrete results for people and for the fight against climate change. And therefore, I think we need partnerships. The Indian-Danish Green Strategic Partnership is, I think, very special because we are two very different countries. I mean, you are such a big country with so many people living here. We are such a small country. We have different traditions, a different culture, but we share some of the same values. We are both democratic nations, and we really believe that we need to do more nationally and globally when it comes to climate change. So the Green Strategic Partnership is, I think, good for India and Denmark, of course, and for fighting climate change, but also globally. Because partnership is a very easy way, I think, not because it's easy, but it's an easy way to actually show some of the concrete results of all the words and our way of thinking.
Here are some other stories from across the world in World at a Glance.
NASA will launch Lucy, a spacecraft designed to probe the Trojan asteroid swarms around Jupiter on this weekend from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The Lucy mission has been designed to find answers to some of the biggest questions in astronomy, like where did we come from and how did our universe begin? During its 12-year operational phase, the spacecraft will study several asteroids in the debris field, flying by one main belt asteroid and 7 Trojan asteroids. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un reviewed a rare exhibition of weapon systems and vowed to build an invincible military as he accused the United States of creating tensions, state media reported this week. In an apparent continued effort to drive a wedge between Washington and Seoul, Kim also said his drive to build up his military is not targeted at South Korea and that there should not be another war pitting Korean people against each other. Japan's new Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, dissolved the lower house of parliament on Thursday, paving the way for October 31 national elections. Kishida says he's seeking the public's mandate for his policies after being elected Prime Minister by Parliament only 10 days ago. He replaced former Prime Minister Yoshide Suga.
That's all in this edition of World Today. We'll see you next week with some more stories from across the world and in-depth analysis of international developments. Stay tuned to India Today.